Hello and welcome to the Genetics and Evolution HD tutorial series for iPad. Genevol HD is an iPad app which allows you to explore and consolidate concepts in genetics and evolution through a series of modules and practice problems. In this introductory video, I'll take you through a quick tour of all the main modules and features of the app. We'll start with the Pedigree Analyzer. Pedigree Analyzer is the first module in the main menu and basically generates pedigrees showing how a family has been afflicted by a certain hypothetical trait. So two tasks involved to test yourself on. Step one is to determine the inheritance mode that's consistent with the pedigree out of the choices presented. For example, we see unafflicted parents here with afflicted offspring, so we'll tap autosomal recessive, and that's marked as correct. Next step is to infer the genotypes of all the individuals in the pedigree. So we tap on genotypes from the toolbox on the left and say little a, and we'll tap on the afflicted individuals there. We can also infer some heterozygous parents here due to their afflicted offspring. So we'll mark those, and we can go on to mark the rest of the inferable genotypes in the pedigree. Some may not be inferable, they may be ambiguous, and they are marked as A-. Once you've solved the pedigree, you can tap the New Pedigree button to generate another pedigree to solve. There's various inheritance modes to explore, and that they will be covered in the deep dive video on Pedigree Analyzer. Next up, Cross Simulator. Cross Simulator is the second module in the menu, and it has two main modes. The first mode, Simulate mode, allows us to simulate various types of crosses between organisms with different numbers of traits and different inheritance modes. For example, let's select a pure breeding line cross for the P organism with one trait being studied. So we can tap the Meiosis button, which shows the gametes being produced, then tap the Fertilize button to show the offspring phenotypes. And here we can see all dominant phenotypes expressed. So we can tap any of the individuals to show further details about them. We can tap the Genotype-Phenotype button to show genotypes. We can use any of the offspring in further crosses, so we can drag them up onto the parents. So now we have a monohybrid cross. And so now if we fertilize, we'll see the typical 3:1 ratio for a single trait. You can perform a number of different cross types by tapping the Cross Type button, including a custom cross where you choose your own genotypes to cross. You can select from various types of organisms with different traits being studied. You can select the number of traits to be studied simultaneously. For example, here's two traits, dihybrid cross. And you can even select up to 3 traits under study. Here's a test cross using 3 traits. You can select from X-linked or autosomal by tapping the Inheritance Type button. Here's an X-linked cross, and you can show the ratios produced for females and for males separately. The other mode of Cross Simulator is the Test Yourself Detective mode, where you're presented with some organisms and you need to infer the genotypes by doing your own crosses. So let's cross organism 1 with the recessive organism 2, do a cross. We can see a half-half ratio, so we infer that organism 1 is heterozygous. So we can tap on organism 1 and select the genotype, or we can tap the individual we actually dragged across, double tap that to infer it. We then go ahead and do further crosses to infer the remaining genotypes of the organisms. Once we've found all the genotypes, we can tap the New button to resort and to try again. Or we can select a different number of traits for a more advanced study. So here's 2 traits. We can try self-crossing organism number 5. If we cross, we see the 9:3:1 ratio, so we're going to infer that organism is doubly heterozygous. You can also select 3 traits. Or you can select X-linked inheritance, and the sex of the organisms is shown in this case. AlleleFreq. AlleleFreq is the third module in the main menu, and it basically allows you to plot the frequency of an allele a over a number of generations under the influence of natural selection and or genetic drift. Here we've selected some default criteria with an infinite population and no difference in fitness between the genotypes, so fairly uneventful. Let's select the recessive detrimental preset instead. So in this case, the little a genotype is slightly less fit than the other two genotypes. Let's select dominant detrimental. Now we can see both the heterozygous and the little a are less fit, so we get a sharper curve. We can tap on each of the runs individually in the table at the bottom, and that shows the allele frequency per generation in the stats table. Now let's look at an example of genetic drift. Okay, here we have a finite population, and we also make use of the multi-run button. We're selecting 5 simultaneous runs, and we can press the go button again to perform some more. And you see in the stats tables, some runs the allele was fixed, some it was lost, and some just ended up at different frequencies between 0 and 1. Where we're using a finite population, we can toggle between frequency or count of the genotypes for each generation. Now let's look at a single new mutation in a population. And here we make use of the input mode 3, where you actually input genotype counts instead of allele frequencies. So here we have a single instance of the little a allele in a heterozygote. We set the multi-run to 40, so it'll run 40 simulations. And you can see most of the time the new allele gets lost, but in one occasion it actually got fixed in the population after a certain number of generations. Problem Central. Problem Central lies in the Practice Problems and Calculators section of the app. It has 3 modes: the problem generator, problem solver, and practice documents. We'll start with the problem generator, which generates problems for you to test yourself on. It has 6 different problem types: Hardy-Weinberg, population growth, breeder's equation heritability, natural selection at a single locus, genetic cross-mapping, and association mapping. Today we'll just look at natural selection at a single locus. For this problem type, it shows the starting frequency of a little a allele as well as the relative fitnesses of the different genotypes, and asks to calculate the selection type and equilibrium frequency for the little a allele. If we tap the answer button, it shows that the selection type is over dominance, and if we plot in allele freq, it shows the tendency towards the equilibrium frequency. Okay, we can tap the refresh button to generate another problem of the same type. This one happens to be a directional recessive advantageous selection. Okay, problem solver. Again, 6 different problem types to choose from, but today we'll look at natural selection problem. In this one, you actually input the parameters yourself, and it will solve the problem for you. So starting frequency and relative fitnesses, you tap solve, and in this case we have a directional dominant advantageous selection. Again, you can plot in allele freq, and it shows you the selection. Okay, lastly, the practice documents mode. This shows you a list of sample practice documents. If you hit the plus sign, you can create your own. So we got a my test, and we can put the number of problems of each type that we want generated in the test. If we tap create, it will generate it under my test. If you tap on my test, it will show you all the problems we generated and their associated answers. Tapping on the document then allows you to email it to a nominated recipient in PDF or text format. Self-test quiz is also in the practice documents section. It presents a series of genetics terms and asks you to pick the correct answer from a multiple choice list. Your progress through the quiz is listed at the bottom. If you get one wrong, you can try again. If you're not sure of a term, you can press the refresh button and it will skip that term until later in the quiz. You can also tap the restart quiz button to restart the quiz from scratch at any time. Okay, that's all we're going to cover in this quick tour. You can get more information on any of the modules in the online manual. And of course, stay tuned for the deep dive tutorials on each of the individual modules separately. Thanks for watching.